A desperate father was putting up posters, looking for his 7-year-old daughter, when a woman said, "Sir, that little girl lives in my house." The revelation she made left the millionaire in shock and changed their lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment on where you are watching from. The March sun painted the streets of Brooklyn golden as David Johnson parked his black Audi in front of the first lamppost on Aspicuelta Street. His hands trembled so much that he almost dropped the roll of tape on the ground. At 38 years old, the CEO of TechFlow Solutions had never felt so lost, so completely out of control. The laminated photo of Sophia, his 7-year-old daughter, smiled at him from the paper. A smile he hadn't seen in 3 days. "My God, Sophia, where are you, my princess?" he murmured, pasting another poster on the lamppost painted blue by the city. The sweet aroma of cherry blossoms filled his nostrils, a fragrance that under different circumstances would remind him of the spring Sundays spent with his daughter in Central Park. Now it only intensified his anguish. Each yellow petal falling from the trees felt like another day without his girl at home. David was a tall man, 6'1", with perfectly styled brown hair and green eyes that usually conveyed confidence and determination in the boardrooms of Wall Street. Today, however, his clothes were wrinkled, the white dress shirt that had cost over $500 was stained with sweat, and his Ralph Lauren tie hung carelessly around his neck. His unshaven beard contrasted sharply with the impeccable image he maintained in the corporate world. "Sir, are you okay?" a feminine voice asked from behind him. David turned quickly, almost knocking over the stack of posters he was holding. In front of him stood a woman about 45 years old, wearing the orange uniform of the sanitation department. Her straight black hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her calloused hands firmly gripped the handle of a broom. Despite her sun-weathered face, her brown eyes radiated a genuine kindness that touched him deeply. I'm looking for my daughter," David replied, his voice choked. "She disappeared 3 days ago. The babysitter said she got distracted for a few minutes in Central Park, and when she looked again..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The woman stepped closer, and David could smell the soap on her clothes, a simple, comforting aroma that contrasted with the expensive perfumes he was used to. "Can I see the photo?" she asked gently. David extended one of the posters with trembling hands. The woman took the paper and carefully examined the image of Sophia, a beautiful girl with curly brown hair, green eyes like her father's, and a smile that lit up any room. The silence stretched for a few seconds that felt like hours. David watched every change in the woman's expression, searching for any sign of recognition. The noise of traffic on Broadway in the background, the sound of birds in the cherry trees, and even the distant buzz of a chainsaw from a nearby construction site all seemed amplified in his ears. "Sir," she finally said, and David felt his heart race. "That little girl lives in my house." The words hit David like a lightning bolt. He stood completely still, unable to process what he had just heard. His eyes widened, and he felt his legs go weak. What? What do you mean? What are you saying?" he stammered, gripping the woman's arm, perhaps more forcefully than he should have. "Calm down, sir, calm down," she said, placing her free hand over his. "My name is Maria Lopez. 3 days ago, an elderly woman appeared at my door with this girl. She said she was the child's grandmother and needed a place to stay for a few days." David felt the world spinning around him. What grandmother? Sophia's mother died when she was 2. There are no living grandparents. Maria shook her head slowly. "Sir, this woman told me a very strange story. She said she pretended to be dead for many years but could no longer stay away from her granddaughter." "That's impossible!" David exclaimed, his voice echoing down the street. A few passers-by stopped to look, curious about the scene. My ex-wife's mother died in a car accident over 15 years ago. I was at the funeral myself. Mr. Johnson, Maria said calmly, and he shuddered at the sound of his name. The woman knew your name. She knew where you live. She knew that Sophia has a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on her left shoulder. David felt his legs give way, and he leaned against the lamppost. The birthmark was something only very close family members knew about. Sophia had always been embarrassed by it and wore shirts that covered it. How is she? Is she okay? Is she scared? He asked, tears finally welling up in his eyes. She's great, sir. Playing in the yard with my boys. In fact, Maria hesitated for a moment. She seems very comfortable, like she has known the woman for a long time. The wind changed direction, bringing with it the aroma of coffee brewing in a nearby apartment. David closed his eyes and tried to organize his thoughts. 3 days of total despair, of not being able to sleep, of mobilizing his entire company and contacts to search for Sophia, and she was safe with a supposed dead grandmother. I need to see her, now, please, he pleaded. Of course, sir. But there's one thing. Maria paused, biting her lower lip. The woman, she doesn't want to see you yet. She said she first needs to explain a lot of things to Sophia, that the situation is complicated. Complicated? David felt the anger starting to bubble inside him. My daughter is missing. I thought she was dead or worse. Nothing. Things can be more complicated than that. I understand, sir, but for Sophia... Maria touched his arm again. You said that if you show up unexpectedly, it might scare the girl. She asked me to bring you tomorrow morning so we can all talk together. David wanted to scream, to demand, to use all the weight of his money and influence to resolve the situation immediately. But something in Maria's calm voice, in the sincerity of her eyes, made him hesitate. How do I know I can trust you? How do I know this isn't some kind of kidnapping or... He stopped, realizing how his words sounded offensive. Maria didn't seem offended. Sir, I have worked for 3 years cleaning the building where your company is located. Always after hours, so we have never met. I can give you my supervisor's name, references, and if you want, you can even call the police to accompany me tomorrow. The mention of her knowing his company calmed him a bit. It was a detail that would be hard to make up. Did she ask about me? David asked, his voice almost a whisper. Every day, Maria replied with a gentle smile. She said her daddy must be very worried and that he would find her soon. She has a lot of faith in you. Tears returned to David's eyes. I failed her. I couldn't protect her. You didn't fail. Sometimes things happen for reasons we don't understand at the moment, Maria said, picking up her broom. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, Maple Street 247, in the Penha neighborhood, the blue house with the green gate. She started to walk away, but David called her back. Maria, why are you helping me? You don't know me. She stopped and turned, a sad smile crossing her face. Because I know what it's like to be away from those we love, sir, and because every child deserves to have their father close. David watched Maria walk away down the sidewalk, her rubber sandals making a rhythmic sound against the concrete. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with orange hues that mixed with the cherry blossoms. For the first time in 3 days, he felt a glimmer of hope blooming in his chest. Tomorrow he would discover the truth. Tomorrow he would hug his daughter again. The alarm went off at 6 in the morning, but David had been awake for hours. He had spent the entire night staring at the ceiling of his duplex apartment in the Upper East Side, mentally replaying every word of the conversation with Maria. His head was buzzing with questions that seemed to have no answers. How could Sarah, the mother of his ex-wife Emily, be alive? Why fake her own death? And most importantly, how had Sophia found her way to her? At 7:30, David was in the shower, letting the hot water run down his tense face. He chose a more casual outfit, dark jeans and a navy polo shirt, in an attempt to appear less intimidating. As he shaved, his hands still trembled slightly. In the mirror, he saw a man who seemed to have aged years in just 3 days. The morning traffic in New York was more congested than usual. David drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, watching the residential buildings of the East Side multiply as he moved away from the financial district. The urban landscape gradually changed. Glass buildings gave way to older constructions, single-story houses with small yards and family-owned businesses. When he finally found Maple Street, it was exactly 9 o'clock. His phone's GPS indicated the number 247, and David parked in front of a 2-story blue house with a green gate, just as Maria had described. The construction was simple but well kept, with a small flowered porch and white bars on the windows. In the backyard, he could see clothes hanging on the line and hear children's voices playing. His heart raced when he recognized one of the voices. It was Sophia. David took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, Maria opened the gate. She was wearing a simple floral dress and had her hair down, making her look younger than the day before. "Good morning, Mr. David," she said with a warm smile. "You arrived just in time. They are having breakfast in the backyard." "They?" David asked as he followed Maria through the small entryway. "Sophia and, well, Miss Sarah." Maria hesitated. "Sir, before you meet them, I need to tell you something. She is very nervous. She is afraid that you won't believe her story." David stopped in the middle of the living room. It was a cozy environment with a floral fabric sofa, an old television, and many photographs on the walls. Family photos, graduations, birthdays. It smelled of fresh coffee and homemade cake. "Maria, I just want to understand what is happening. Why did she fake her own death? Why is she showing up now?" David asked, his voice heavy with emotion. "That she will have to explain," Maria replied. "But I can say that she loves Sophia very much. For the last 3 days, she hasn't stopped telling stories about when Emily was little." Maria led him to the back door, which opened to a spacious backyard with several fruit trees. A white plastic table was set with a red checkered tablecloth, and on it were plates with French bread, butter, homemade jam, and a thermos of coffee. 2 teenagers, a boy about 16 and a girl of 14, were sitting and chatting animatedly, but David only had eyes for the curly-haired girl who was running after a golden retriever. "Sophia!" he shouted, unable to contain himself. The girl stopped immediately and turned around. When she saw David, her little face lit up in a way that made his heart almost explode with relief. "Daddy!" she shouted, running toward him. David knelt down and opened his arms. Sophia threw herself at them with such force that she nearly knocked him over. He hugged her tightly against his chest, inhaling the scent of children's shampoo in her hair, feeling the reality of having her back in his arms. My princess," he repeated, tears streaming down his face. "Daddy was so worried." "I knew you would find me," Sophia said, her small hands clutching his shirt. "I told Grandma Sarah that my daddy always finds me." "Grandma Sarah?" David looked up and finally saw her. Sitting in a wicker rocking chair was a woman David recognized instantly, even after so many years. Sarah appeared to be in her 70s, with grey hair tied in a low bun, wearing a light blue dress and a beige cardigan. Her eyes were just like Maria's, a very distinctive greyish blue, but her face was marked with wrinkles that spoke of years of suffering and longing. "Hello, David," she said with a trembling voice, her hands nervously clutching a tissue. "I know you must be very confused and angry with me." David slowly stood up, still holding Sophia in his arms. The girl was heavy for her 7 years, but he didn't want to let her go for even a second. "Ms. Sarah," he said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. I don't understand. How are you alive? I was at your funeral." Sarah lowered her eyes. "It was all staged, my son. I needed to escape a situation that was killing me inside." "What situation?" David asked, sitting in a nearby chair without releasing Sophia. "My husband," Sarah replied, her voice almost a whisper. "Richard was not the man you knew. At home, he was violent, very violent, and when he found out I was questioning the arranged marriage he wanted to force on Maria." Jessica discreetly approached and offered a cup of coffee to David. She had instructed her own children, Junior and Letitia, to give space for the conversation, but they were watching everything with respectful curiosity from the other side of the yard. "You faked your own death to escape domestic violence?" David asked, trying to process the information. "Richard had a lot of money, many connections. If I just ran away, he would find me and force me to come back. Or worse," Sarah explained, her hands trembling. "A doctor friend helped me stage the accident. I changed my name, moved here to the east side, far away from everything." Sophia shifted in David's lap. "Daddy, Grandma Sarah told me she had to hide because Grandpa Richard was mean to her." David felt a lump in his throat. How could he explain to a 7-year-old the horrors that some people were capable of committing? "But why didn't you ever look for Maria? Why did you let her suffer thinking you were dead?" David asked, feeling the old anger towards his ex-wife mixed with a new understanding. "Because Richard was always watching Maria," Sarah replied, tears beginning to stream down her wrinkled cheeks. "He used my death to control her even more. He said that if she didn't obey, more tragedies could happen. I couldn't appear and put my daughter in greater danger." "But you knew she married me, that she had Sophia," David insisted. "I knew everything," Sarah said, looking lovingly at her granddaughter. "I followed her from a distance. I saw you at the park, at school, at birthday parties. I was always nearby, protecting without anyone knowing." Jessica approached again. "Mr. David, may I explain how Sophia ended up here?" David nodded, still processing everything he had just heard. "Last Sunday, Sophia was at Central Park with the babysitter. The girl got distracted, just as she said. But Sophia didn't get lost," Jessica explained. "She saw Grandma Sarah on a nearby bench and recognized her." "Recognized her how?" David asked. "I always showed pictures of Grandma to Sophia," the little girl replied, snuggling closer to her father. "Mommy had a picture of Grandma in her drawer, and I always looked at it secretly." David vaguely remembered Maria keeping some old photographs, but he had never paid much attention. "When Sophia saw me," Sarah continued, "she ran over. She started crying and said she knew I wasn't dead, that she had always been sure. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." "And why didn't you call me immediately?" David asked. "Because I needed time to explain everything to her. And because—" Sarah hesitated. "Because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, or that you would try to keep me away from her again." The morning sun was getting stronger, and the scent of flowers from Jessica's yard, roses, jasmine, and some plants David couldn't identify, created an almost surreal atmosphere for this conversation that would change their lives forever. "Daddy," Sophia said, looking into her father's green eyes, "you're not going to send Grandma away, are you?" David looked at the elderly woman who had sacrificed everything to protect her daughter, and who was now trembling with fear of being rejected by her granddaughter. He looked at Jessica, who had risked getting involved in a complex situation just to reunite a family. And he looked at his daughter, who seemed happier and more complete than he had seen her in a long time. "No, Princess," he finally said. "Grandma Sarah is not going anywhere." The relief that spread across Sarah's face was almost palpable. She brought her hands to her chest and closed her eyes for a moment, as if making a silent prayer of gratitude. Jessica smiled discreetly as she collected the empty cups from the table, giving the family space to process that moment of reconciliation. "But I need to understand some things," David said, adjusting Sophia in his lap. The little girl was absent-mindedly playing with the buttons on his shirt, clearly relieved. Sarah felt grateful to have the two most important adults in her life in the same place. "Mrs. Sarah, how have you survived all these years? Where did you live? How did you support yourself?" Sarah settled more comfortably in the rocking chair, the wicker creaking softly. Conceiçon's backyard was a refuge of tranquility amidst the urban chaos. The fruit trees provided pleasant shade, and the song of robins mixed with the distant noise of traffic. "After the fake accident, I hid out in a farmhouse in Westchester for almost a year," she began, her hands still trembling slightly. "A distant cousin helped me. When things calmed down, I came here, to the east side. I changed my name to Sarah Lopez, got new documents." "And Richard never suspected?" David asked. "Richard died 8 years ago," Sarah replied, a mix of relief and sadness in her voice. "Heart attack. It was only after that I managed to get a little closer, but Emily was already complicated." David knew exactly what she was referring to. Emily had always been emotionally unstable, but after Sophia was born, the situation deteriorated rapidly. She developed severe postpartum depression and began going out alone to find herself, leaving their daughter increasingly in David's care and with babysitters. "Did you know that Emily abandoned us?" David asked, feeling a tightness in his chest at the painful memory. "Yes, I did," Sarah sighed deeply. "I was at a nearby park the day she left home for the last time. I saw her put the bags in the car. I saw you begging her to stay. I saw Sophia crying at the window." Sophia lifted her head from her father's chest. "Grandma told me that Mommy went on a trip to a very far place to try to be less sad." David felt a pang of gratitude that Sarah had spared the girl from the more painful details of her mother's abandonment. Emily had simply disappeared one October morning, leaving only a note saying she could no longer live that life, that she needed to be free. "How did you manage to get close to Sophia without me noticing?" David asked. "I've been working in your company's building for 3 years, a new voice said. David turned and saw Conceição approaching with a plate of homemade cookies. "I always cleaned up after hours, so you never saw me. But Mrs. Sarah would visit me sometimes, and sometimes she would stay in the outdoor area of the building just to see you from afar." "See us?" David frowned. "I saw you pick up Sophia from school. I saw you walking down the street," Sarah explained, a shy smile appearing on her face. "You are a wonderful father, David. The way you hold her hand, how you bend down to listen to what she has to say. Emily would be very proud." David felt a lump in his throat. Being a single father had not been easy. Sleepless nights when Sophia was sick, school meetings he tried to fit in between work commitments, the constant juggling between being a provider and a caregiver. "Daddy," Sophia said, pulling his attention, "can I show you what Grandma taught me?" "Of course, Princess." Sophia jumped down from David's lap and ran to a small garden at the back of the yard. Sarah struggled to get up from the rocking chair. David noticed she limped slightly on her left leg and called him to join them. "Grandma taught me how to plant basil," Sophia said excitedly, pointing to small pots with green seedlings. She said her great-grandmother, who was Italian, always planted herbs. David knelt beside his daughter and examined the little plants. The fresh smell of basil was intense and pleasant. "Do you remember your Italian great-grandmother, Mrs. Sarah?" "Nonna Francesca," Sarah replied fondly. "She raised me after my parents died in the Spanish flu. She taught me that a home is only complete when it smells of good food and true love." "And what else did Grandma teach you, Sophia?" David asked, genuinely curious to understand how those 3 days he considered the worst of his life had been. She taught me how to braid, Sophia said, touching her curly hair that was tied in a simple but well-made braid. And she told me stories about Mommy when she was little like me. David looked at Sarah, who was watching her granddaughter with an expression of pure adoration. What kind of stories? That Emily was as stubborn as Sophia. Sarah chuckled softly. That she also liked to plant things, and that once she tried to plant gummy bears thinking they would grow into candy trees. Sophia let out a crystal-clear laugh. Grandma said, "I'm just like Mommy." David felt a pang of pain. Sophia rarely mentioned Emily, and he always worried about the impact her mother's abandonment could have on the girl's self-esteem. Seeing her joy in discovering similarities with her mother through her grandmother's loving eyes was deeply comforting. "Mr. David," Conceição approached discreetly. "Can I talk to you for a minute? In private?" David agreed and asked Sophia to continue showing the garden to Sarah. He followed Conceição to the front porch of the house. "What is it?" he asked, noticing a look of concern on her face. "It's about Mrs. Sarah," Conceição said quietly. "She's not well. These 3 days here, I've noticed she has a lot of difficulty walking, and sometimes she seems a bit confused." David felt his stomach tighten. Confused how? Yesterday she forgot for a moment where she was. She started looking for Emily around the house, saying she was late for dinner. Sophia got worried. "And today, is she okay?" "Today she's great. But I think she needs medical care. And most importantly," Conceição hesitated, "she needs a family. She lived alone in a studio apartment in Astoria, sir, with no one around." David ran his hand through his hair. He ran his fingers through his hair, feeling the weight of responsibilities multiplying. First, he had to learn how to be a single father. Now, apparently, he needed to figure out how to care for an elderly mother-in-law who had faked her own death for 15 years. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. "It's not my decision, sir," Jessica replied diplomatically. "But I can tell you that this lady loves her granddaughter more than life itself, and Sophia has flourished these past 3 days with a maternal figure around." David looked out the window to the backyard, where he saw Sophia animatedly gesturing while explaining something about the plants to Sarah. The girl was radiant, more talkative and spontaneous than he had seen her in months. "Why are you getting so involved in this?" David asked. "Don't get me wrong, I'm deeply grateful, but why?" Jessica looked away for a moment, watching a yellow butterfly land on a nearby rosebush. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without a grandmother, sir. My parents died when I was a child, and I was raised by relatives who didn't have much affection to give. And because," she paused, "sometimes God places people in our path when we need them the most." "Do you believe it was God who made our paths cross?" David asked, surprised by the depth of this woman he had known for less than 24 hours. "I believe nothing in life is a coincidence," Jessica replied simply. "You were desperately searching for your daughter. Sarah was alone and sick, caring for a child who needed her father, and I was there at the right time to connect the dots." David fell silent for a few moments, processing everything. His life had changed completely in less than a day. That morning, he had woken up thinking he might never see Sophia again. Now, not only was she safe in his arms, but he had discovered he had an extended family he didn't even know existed. "Jessica," he finally said, "how can I repay what you've done for us?" "Take good care of them," she replied without hesitation. "And let Sophia visit me from time to time. She got along really well with my kids." At that moment, Sophia came running onto the porch. "Daddy, Daddy, Grandma said she can teach me how to make great-grandma's pasta. Can we invite her over for dinner?" David looked at his daughter's hopeful little face and felt his heart warm. "Of course, Princess. Let's invite Grandma Sarah for dinner." "And Aunt Jessica too?" Sophia asked, taking Jessica's hand. She makes the best chocolate cake in the world." David laughed, the first genuine laugh he had had in 3 days. "Sure, let's invite Aunt Jessica too." As he watched Sophia jump for joy, David realized that his life had just gained a complexity he didn't know if he was ready to handle. But for the first time in a long time, his home would no longer be just a place where he and Sophia lived alone. It would be a home filled with voices, stories, and perhaps real love. 3 weeks after the reunion in Jessica's backyard, David was in the kitchen of his duplex apartment trying to peel potatoes with the same precision he used to analyze financial spreadsheets. It wasn't working very well. "Oh, Daddy, that's not how you do it," Sophia laughed, climbing onto a stool to reach the marble countertop. "Grandma Sarah taught me. Look." The girl took the peeler from David's hands and demonstrated the correct motion. At 7 years old, she was already peeling potatoes with more skill than the CEO of one of the most prosperous tech companies in New York. "Where did I go wrong in raising her?" David murmured to himself, smiling. The apartment had undergone some transformations in the past few weeks. The dining table, which had previously served more as a place to hold laptops and documents, now had a patterned tablecloth that Sarah had brought from her old home. The gigantic fridge, which used to house only light yogurts and take-out sushi, was now filled with fresh ingredients and containers of homemade leftovers. Sarah was in the living room, sitting on the Italian leather sofa that had cost the equivalent of many people's annual salaries, knitting a pink scarf for Sophia while watching a soap opera. David still found it surreal to see her there, occupying that space that had long been just for him and his daughter. The doorbell rang precisely at 7 o'clock. "It's Aunt Jessica," Sophia shouted, running to answer. "Sophia, don't open the door by yourself," David called, drying his hands on a dish towel. "I know, Daddy. I'll ask who it is first." David shook his head, smiling. Sarah had taught Sophia much more than just cooking in the past few weeks. She had taught her little rules of safety and behavior that he sometimes forgot to address in the hustle and bustle of daily life. Jessica entered, carrying a platter covered with a checkered cloth and a plastic bag. She wore a simple navy blue dress and had let her hair down, which fell in soft waves to her shoulders. David noticed she had a smile that genuinely lit up any room. "I brought flan," she announced, handing the platter to Sophia, "and some special ingredients that you don't have here." "What special ingredients?" David asked curiously. "Real spices," Jessica laughed. "That beautiful gourmet kitchen has everything except the spices that give home-cooked meals their flavor." David felt slightly embarrassed. His kitchen was indeed impressive: marble countertops, state-of-the-art imported appliances, a climate-controlled wine cellar. But Jessica was right. It lacked soul. It was more of a magazine decor scene than a place where food was made with love. "Jessica," Sarah called from the living room, "come here. I want to show you something." Jessica went to greet Sarah, and David watched the two women chatting. It was interesting to see how they had developed a friendship. Sarah shared stories from her youth, and Jessica listened with respectful attention, sometimes sharing her own experiences. "Dad," Lily tugged at his jeans, "can I help Aunt Jessica season the meat?" "Of course, Princess." David returned to the kitchen and watched Jessica lead the dinner preparation with impressive ease. She had brought fresh garlic, red onion, colorful bell peppers, and several bags of spices that David couldn't identify just by smell. "What is this?" he asked, pointing to a reddish powder. "Sweet paprika," Jessica replied, sprinkling the spice over the pieces of meat. "It adds color and a slightly smoky flavor." "And this?" David pointed to another sachet. "Cumin. It goes well with red meat." David felt like a foreigner in his own kitchen, but it was a strangely pleasant sensation. For years, his meals had mostly consisted of delivery from expensive restaurants or microwave-ready dishes that cost more than a budget car. "Can I do something?" he offered. You can chop the vegetables, Jessica said, handing him a knife. Small, even cubes. David began chopping carrots with the concentration of a surgeon. Jessica watched for a few seconds before laughing softly. It's not surgery, Mr. David. It's just food. I know, but... He stopped chopping and looked at her. I never learned these things. My mom passed away when I was a teenager, and after that I lived mostly on takeout and ready-made meals. And when you married Emily? Jessica asked gently. Emily didn't cook either, David replied, returning to chop the carrots. She said cooking was a thing of the past, that modern women didn't need to know how to cook. Jessica said nothing, but David noticed a slight change in her expression. It wasn't judgment, but something like sadness, as if she felt pity for him for having missed out on a whole dimension of care and domestic love. What are you thinking? He asked. That every family has its way of showing love, Jessica replied diplomatically. But it's nice when a home smells of food being made with care. Lily appeared in the kitchen carrying the pink scarf that Sarah was knitting. Aunt Jessica, look what Grandma is making for me. How lovely, dear, Jessica said, admiring the work. Your grandma has fairy hands. She said she will teach me to knit too, and that when I grow up I can make scarves for all my children, Lily said naturally. David felt a tightness in his chest. His 7-year-old daughter was already planning to be a mother, something he hadn't even realized she thought about. Once again, he noticed how much Sarah had filled gaps in his education that he hadn't known existed. Dinner was ready an hour later, and for the first time in years, David's table was set for a real family meal. Sarah had insisted on using the good china, porcelain plates that were saved for special occasions that never came, and Jessica had brought cloth napkins from her own home. Let's hold hands to give thanks, Sarah said when everyone sat down. David hesitated for a moment. His family had never been religious, and he wasn't in the habit of praying before meals, but he reached out for Lily on one side and Jessica on the other. Thank you, Lord, for bringing us together at this table, Sarah began, her voice emotional, for reuniting this family and for placing good-hearted people in our path. Protect this home and make sure there is always room for one more. Amen. Amen, the three voices responded in unison. David opened his eyes and saw Jessica looking at him with a soft smile. There was something in her gaze that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't experienced in a long time. Not as a powerful CEO or a competent single father, but simply as a man who needed care just as much as he offered. The food is delicious, he said after tasting the first forkful. Is the meat cooked just right? Jessica asked. Perfect. How did you learn to cook like this? My mother, Jessica replied simply. She passed away when I was 15, but she taught me that food made with love heals more than medicine. And your father? David asked, genuinely interested in learning more about the woman who had become so important to his family. My father left us when I was 12, she said without bitterness in her voice. He just left one day and never came back. That's why you understood so much when I was looking for Lily, David realized. That and because... Jessica hesitated for a moment. Because I know how important it is to have a father who doesn't give up. Sarah, who had been silent listening to the conversation, placed her hand over Jessica's. You are a very strong woman, my dear. And you are a very brave woman, Jessica replied. It's not easy to start life over in your 50s. Actually, Sarah smiled shyly, I'm 72. David nearly choked on his wine. 72? You look much younger. It's because I'm happy now, Sarah said, looking affectionately at Lily. Happiness rejuvenates the soul. After dinner, while Jessica and Sarah washed the dishes in the kitchen, adamantly refusing to use the dishwasher because talking while washing dishes is part of the therapy, David took Lily to brush her teeth. Dad, she said while brushing her little teeth, "Do you like Aunt Jessica?" "Of course I do, Princess. She's a very special person." "No, Dad." Lily spat out the toothpaste and looked seriously at him. "Do you really like her? Like how the prince likes the princess?" David knelt beside his daughter at her eye level. "Why are you asking that?" "Because you both look at each other like the characters in Grandma's soap opera," Lily said with frankness. "The children were brutal, and because when she smiles, you look like a fool." David laughed, feeling his cheeks flush. "I look like a fool." "You do, and I think it's nice," Lily said, hugging his neck. "Aunt Jessica makes you worry less." When they returned to the living room, they found Sarah and Jessica on the sofa, flipping through an old photo album that Sarah had brought from her home. "This is Emily at 5 years old," Sarah was saying, showing a faded picture. "Just like Lily." David approached and saw a photo of a girl with curly hair and green eyes playing in a flower-filled yard. The resemblance to Lily was striking. "She looks happy in this photo," David commented. "That was before Richard started to become more controlling," Sarah sighed. "Emily was a cheerful child until she turned 10. After that—" "What happened when she turned 10? Jessica asked gently. "Richard decided she needed to become a real lady," Sarah explained, the sadness evident in her voice. "He banned outdoor play, enrolled her in piano and French classes, and started choosing her friends." David felt a pang of understanding. Perhaps Emily's abandonment wasn't just irresponsibility. Maybe she had never truly learned to be a mother because she had never had the chance to be a child. "That's why I don't want anyone to clip Lily's wings," Sarah said, closing the album. "A child should be a child for as long as possible." David looked at his daughter, who was on the living room floor playing with her dolls, with a naturalness that he sometimes feared would be lost too soon. His apartment, once silent and organized like an office, now echoed with laughter, conversations, and the soft music that Sarah always played when she was knitting. When it was time for Jessica to leave, David insisted on driving her home. "You don't have to, Mr. David," she protested. "I can take the bus just fine." "No way," David said firmly. "It's late, and you're alone." During the 20-minute drive to Jessica's home in Queens, they chatted about small talk, the traffic, his work, her children. But David noticed an ease in the conversation that he hadn't experienced with others in a long time. Jessica didn't seem impressed by his professional success or intimidated by his social standing. She treated him simply as a man, a father, a person. "David," she said when he stopped in front of her house, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "You have a wonderful daughter, a successful business, a comfortable life. But are you happy?" she repeated. David fell silent for a few moments, watching the lights on in the windows of the houses on Jessica's street. "I don't know if I think much about happiness," he answered honestly. "I think more about responsibility, about fulfilling obligations. And does that satisfy you?" "It used to," he said, surprising himself with his own answer. "But lately I've started to question if something is missing." Jessica smiled. "Thank you for such a special day. Sarah and Lily are very special people." "And so are you," David said, looking into her eyes. For a moment, they stared at each other in silence. David felt an urge to lean in and kiss her, but he held back. It was too soon, too complicated. "Good night, David," she said softly, getting out of the car. "Good night, Jessica." As he drove back home, David realized that Lily was right. He really did look like a fool when Jessica smiled. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't bother him at all. May brought with it the first rains of autumn in New York and a routine that David had never imagined living, waking up at 7 in the morning to the smell of brewed coffee from Sarah, having breakfast while listening to Lily recount her dreams from the night before, and leaving for work knowing that his daughter would be in good hands when she returned from school. Sarah had officially moved into the apartment a week after the dinner with Jessica. David transformed his home office into a cozy room for her, with a comfortable bed and an armchair near the window where she could knit while watching the street's activity. Mr. David, Patricia, his secretary, entered his office at TechFlow Solutions with a worried expression. "There's a lady here who insists on speaking with you. She says it's about your daughter." David looked up from the financial reports he was analyzing. It was 2 in the afternoon on a rainy Thursday, and he was trying to concentrate on numbers that seemed to dance on the computer screen. Since Sarah had come into his life, he had found it harder to maintain the absolute focus on work that had always characterized him. "What lady?" "Emily is at home with Lily." "She didn't want to give her name," Patricia said nervously. "But she said she's the girl's mother." David felt the blood run cold in his veins. "The mother?" "Sir, I told her you were in a meeting, but she became very agitated. She said she had rights and wouldn't leave until she spoke with you." David stood up from the leather chair, feeling his legs weaken. Emily. After 3 years of absolute silence, Emily had returned. "Let her in," he said, trying to control his voice. 2 minutes later, the door opened and David saw the woman he once loved, who had been the mother of his daughter and who had abandoned them on a cold October morning. Emily Johnson, she had kept her married surname, looked different, thinner, with platinum blonde hair in a modern cut, wearing expensive designer clothes that David didn't recognize. Her blue eyes, once sweet, now had a hardness he had never seen. "Hello, David," she said, sitting down in the chair across from his desk, without being invited. "Emily!" Her voice came out rougher than she intended. "What do you want?" "I want my daughter back," she said directly, crossing her legs with studied elegance. David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Your daughter? You abandoned Lily 3 years ago. You left a note and disappeared." "I had issues to resolve," Emily said coldly. "Now I'm settled, and I want to resume my life with my daughter." "Settled where? Doing what?" David asked, trying to keep calm. "I've been living in Paris for 2 years. I have an art studio, and I'm recognized in the European art scene," she lied shamelessly. David had always known when Emily was lying. She blinked rapidly and touched her neck. "And suddenly you remembered you have a daughter in the USA?" "I never forgot about Lily," Emily retorted, but her voice lacked conviction. "Mothers don't forget their children, David." "Mothers also don't abandon their children," David said, anger beginning to bubble. "Lily spent nights crying, asking when Mommy would come back. She had nightmares for months. She needed therapy." "That's why I'm here," Emily said, opening an expensive handbag and pulling out some papers. "I brought my lawyer. I have maternal rights." David looked at the documents in disbelief. It was a shared custody petition signed by a reputable law firm in New York. "Are you serious?" he asked. "Completely. Lily needs her mother, especially now that she's entering an age where she needs female role models." "She has female role models," David said, thinking of Sarah and Jessica. "She has her grandmother, whom you thought was dead." Emily frowned. "Which grandmother? My mother died 15 years ago." "She didn't die, Emily. She faked her own death to escape your father's violence. And you knew that, didn't you?" Emily's face visibly paled. "That's impossible." "Your mother has been living with me and Lily for 3 weeks. She told the whole truth about Richard, about the abuse, about why she had to disappear," David said, watching Emily's reaction carefully. "My father wasn't violent," Emily exclaimed, but her voice trembled. "Wasn't he? Then why were you so afraid of being a mother? Why did you always say you didn't know how to take care of a child?" David leaned over the table. "Your mother told me about the arranged marriages, about how he controlled every aspect of your life." Emily fell silent for a few moments, and David could see the scared girl she hid behind the facade of a sophisticated woman. "Even if that's true," she finally said, "it doesn't change the fact that Lily is my daughter." "Biologically, yes. But where were you when she had chickenpox, when she learned to ride a bike, when she was afraid of monsters under the bed?" David felt his voice rising. "Where were you, Emily?" "I was finding myself," she replied weakly. "Finding yourself," David repeated with disdain. "And now that you've found yourself, you decided you want to be a mother." "I have legal rights," Emily said, returning to her cold tone, "and I can offer her a better life, an international, multicultural life." "A life away from her father? If necessary." David abruptly stood up from the chair, causing Emily to instinctively step back. "You will not take my daughter from me, not after everything we've been through." "We'll see what the justice system has to say about that." Emily stood up as well, grabbing her handbag. "My lawyer will file the case tomorrow. I hope you have a good lawyer too." After Emily left, David stood by the window of his office, watching the rain fall over the grey city. His thoughts flew between indignation, fear, and deep sadness. How dare Emily come back now, just when he had managed to build a stable family for Lily? His phone rang. It was Jessica. "Hi, David." Her voice sounded worried. "Sarah is very upset. Lily came home from school saying she saw a blonde woman watching the school gate from inside a car. Sarah thinks it might be Emily." "It is Emily," David said, feeling a knot in his stomach. "She was here. She wants custody of Lily." Silence on the other end of the line. "David," Jessica finally said, "you need to come home. Sarah is not doing well." David arrived home 20 minutes later, driving like a madman through the rain. He found Sarah sitting in the living room, very pale, with trembling hands, while Lily, scared, clung to her. "Sarah, what happened?" he asked, kneeling beside her armchair. "She came back," Sarah whispered. "Emily came back and is going to take my granddaughter away." "She won't take anyone," David said firmly. "I'm not going to let that happen." "Daddy," Lily turned to him. With tear-filled eyes, "The school aunt said a lady asked for my name and my grade. I got scared." David picked his daughter up, feeling a fury grow inside him. Emily had no right to scare Lily like this, to just show up after years and cause this chaos in their lives. "Princess," he said softly, "do you remember Mommy?" Lily shook her head. "Only from the pictures Grandma showed me. The woman you saw at school today is your biological mother. She left when you were little, but now she's back. Does she want to take me away from—" "You?" Lily asked, tightening her grip around her father's neck. "She does, but I'm not going to let that happen," David said, looking into his daughter's eyes. "You are my girl, and no one is going to separate us." Jessica, who had been discreetly in the kitchen, approached with a warm cup of tea for Sarah. "David," she said quietly, "you need to talk to a family law attorney as soon as possible." "I'm already arranging that," David replied. "But tell me something, Jessica. As a woman, as a mother, do you think Emily has any real chance of getting custody?" Jessica hesitated for a moment, looking at Lily nestled in her father's lap and Sarah trembling with fear. The armchair. "Legally, I don't know, but morally—" She paused. "A mother who abandons a child and comes back after 3 years is not thinking about the child's well-being. She's thinking about herself." "What if she succeeds?" David asked, his voice heavy with fear. "Then we will have to fight," Jessica said simply. "Because family is not just biology. Family is who stays, who cares, who loves every day." That night, after putting Lily to bed and ensuring that Sarah was feeling better, David sat on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city lights below. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh and clean. Jessica had stayed for dinner and to help with Lily, and now she was beside him, holding a cup of tea. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "I'm terrified," David admitted, "not just of losing Lily, but of all the progress we've made. She was so happy, so balanced. And now you all will face this situation together," Jessica said. "Lily, you, Sarah, and you?" David asked, looking into her eyes. "If they let me help, yes." David reached out and took her hand. It was calloused from work, but warm and comforting. "Jessica," he said, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "And I know it can be complicated. I know we're from different worlds, but—" "David," she gently interrupted, squeezing his hand, "I'm falling in love with you too." They fell silent for a few moments, just holding hands and watching the city lights. "What are we going to do about Emily?" David finally asked. "We will show any judge who sees the case who the best family for Lily is," Jessica replied. "We will show love, stability, and what is best for a child." "And what if it's not enough?" "It will be," Jessica said with conviction. "Because the truth always comes to light, David. Always." But even with Jessica's comforting words, David spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering if love and stability would really be enough against the biological rights of a mother who had abandoned her own daughter. The storm was just beginning. The law firm, Johnson & Associates, was located on the 22nd floor of one of the most imposing buildings on Fifth Avenue. David arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, wearing his best Italian suit and carrying a leather briefcase with all the documents he deemed relevant to the case. Dr. Edward Johnson was a man in his early 50s, with perfectly styled grey hair and a firm handshake that inspired confidence. His office was decorated with diplomas and photographs alongside influential politicians, conveying exactly the image of power and competence that David needed at that moment. "Mr. Johnson," Dr. Johnson said, offering him a leather armchair, "I received the summary of your case from my secretary. Your ex-wife wants custody of your daughter after 3 years of absence." "Exactly," David replied, opening his briefcase. "And I brought all the evidence proving my exclusive care for Lily since the abandonment." Dr. Johnson carefully examined the documents. School reports signed only by David, receipts for medical appointments, account statements showing all expenses for the child, photos from birthdays and school events where only the father was present. "It's solid documentation," the lawyer agreed. "But I need to be honest with you. Legally, abandonment for 3 years does not automatically result in loss of parental rights. The courts here still tend to favor the maternal figure, especially when the mother claims to have re-established herself and is able to provide a suitable home." David felt his stomach tighten. "But she abandoned Lily, left a note and disappeared." "What does she claim about that abandonment?" Dr. Johnson asked, taking notes on a pad. "That she had personal issues to resolve and is now settled living in Paris," David replied with disdain. "Does she have proof of this financial and emotional stability?" "I don't know. She mentioned an art studio, but she's always been a compulsive liar." Dr. Johnson made more notes. "We will need to investigate her actual situation. And we have another potential problem. You mentioned a lawyer. Do you know who it is?" "No." "Find out. This could give us clues about the strategy she intends to use." Dr. Johnson leaned back in his chair. "Now tell me about your current situation. Do you have help taking care of Lily? Nannies? Family?" David took a deep breath. "Lily's maternal grandmother, whom we thought was dead for 15 years, recently showed up. She was hiding to escape an abusive marriage and is now living with us." Dr. Johnson raised his eyebrows. "That's unusual. Does she have documents proving her identity?" "Yes, and there's a woman who helped us find Lily when she disappeared for 3 days. She was actually with her grandmother. This woman has become very close to our family." "What is the nature of this closeness?" Dr. Johnson asked with a penetrating gaze, needing to know all the details. David hesitated for a moment. We're developing a relationship. She's an exceptional person, works hard, takes great care of Lily. What is her profession? She works in urban cleaning, David admitted, feeling ridiculous for being ashamed of that. Dr. Johnson stopped writing and looked directly at David. Mr. Johnson, I need you to understand one thing. If this case goes to court, every aspect of your life will be scrutinized. The social background of this woman, the fact that the resurrected grandmother is living in your house, all of this can be used against you. Used how? David asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. Your ex-wife may claim that you expose Lily to unstable situations, that you are involving the child with people of dubious backgrounds, that your new romantic relationship is compromising your judgment as a father. David felt anger boiling inside him. Jessica is worth 10 of Emily. She takes care of Lily as if she were her own daughter. I'm not questioning her character, Mr. Johnson. I'm explaining how this could be interpreted legally, Dr. Martin said calmly. A conservative judge might see the situation as wealthy, single father getting involved with a cleaning staff member, child being cared for by an elderly woman of questionable background. Questionable background? David stood up from his chair. Sarah is Lily's legitimate grandmother, who faked her own death and disappeared for 15 years. Dr. Martin retorted. I'm your lawyer, Mr. Johnson. My job is to anticipate all the arguments the opposing side could use. David sat back down, running his hands through his hair. So, what do you suggest? First, let's investigate the real situation of your ex-wife. Second, we'll compile irrefutable evidence of abandonment and how this has negatively affected the child. Third, Dr. Martin paused, you need to consider minimizing Lily's exposure to drastic changes while the case is ongoing. What does that mean? It may be advisable for the grandmother and your new partner to maintain a more discreet presence in Lily's life until we resolve this. David was silent for a few minutes, processing the suggestion. The idea of distancing Sarah and Jessica from Lily for legal strategy revolted him deeply. No, he finally said, I won't distance the only stable female figures in my daughter's life for the sake of legal strategy. Mr. Johnson? No, David repeated firmly. If we're going to win this case, it will be by showing how well-structured Lily's life is now, not by hiding the people who love her. Dr. Martin watched him for a few seconds before smiling slightly. I understand your position. Then let's work with this strategy, but I need you to be aware of the risks. I'm aware. When David arrived home 2 hours later, he found Jessica in the kitchen preparing lunch while Sarah helped Lily with her homework at the dining table. The peaceful domestic scene contrasted sharply with the tension he felt inside. How was it with the lawyer? Jessica asked, not looking up from the pan where she was sautéing vegetables. Complicated, David replied, moving closer to her. He thinks our situation could be used against us. Our situation? Jessica finally looked at him. The fact that you work in urban cleaning, that Sarah faked her death, that we're in a relationship, he thinks a judge might interpret it as instability. Jessica turned her body completely towards him, the wooden spoon still in her hand. And do you agree with him? Of course not. But you're thinking of distancing me from Lily to protect your chances in the case, she completed, her voice cold. That's not it, Jessica. It is exactly that, she said, stirring the food with more force than necessary. And you know what? I understand. Understand. I understand that you want to protect Lily above all else. It's what any parent would do, Jessica said, but David could detect the hurt in her voice. Jessica, look at me, he asked, gently touching her shoulder. She turned back, and David could see tears forming in her eyes. "I told the lawyer that I won't distance either you or Sarah from Lily," David said firmly. "I said that if we're going to win this case, it will be by showing how much better her life is now, not by hiding the people who make her happy." Jessica's face softened. "You really said that?" "I did, because you two are part of the family now, and family isn't hidden, family protects each other." Jessica dropped the spoon and threw herself into his arms, hugging him tightly. David smelled the simple shampoo she used, mixed with the aroma of the food she was preparing. "Daddy!" Lily came running into the kitchen. "Grandma helped me with my math homework. Do you want to see?" "Of course, Princess," David said, stepping away from Jessica but keeping one hand on her waist. Lily proudly showed her notebook filled with addition and subtraction problems, all correct. "Grandma said she was a teacher when she was young." David looked at Sarah, who had approached the kitchen. "Were you a teacher?" "I was," Sarah smiled shyly. "I taught elementary school for 10 years before marrying Richard. Then he forbade me from working." An idea began to form in David's mind. "Sarah, do you still remember how to handle children? Teaching methods?" "Like it was yesterday," she replied. "Why?" "Because we may have found our main weapon against Sarah," David said, looking back and forth between Sarah and Jessica. "A judge can question many things, but they can't question that. Lily is being cared for by an experienced educator and a woman who shows genuine maternal love." "What are you thinking?" Jessica asked. "I'm thinking we will document every positive aspect of Lily's life with us. We'll show her school grades, her emotional development, the stability she has now," David explained, his mind racing. "And we'll let Sarah expose herself." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "Sarah has always been impulsive and dishonest. If we push in the right direction, she'll reveal her true face," David said. "And when that happens, any judge will see who truly has Lily's best interests at heart." That afternoon, while Lily played in the backyard of Jessica's house with Jake and Emily, the 3 adults carefully planned how to document and strengthen the family structure they had built. Jessica suggested talking to Lily's teachers about her recent development. Sarah proposed organizing all the photographs and memories from the past few months. David decided to hire a private investigator to uncover the real situation of Sarah in Los Angeles. "There's something I need to tell you," Sarah said as they were finishing organizing the documents. "Sarah called me this morning." David and Jessica immediately stopped what they were doing. "She called? How did she get your number?" David asked. "She must have found out through some old records," Sarah replied, her hands trembling slightly. "She said she wanted to talk to me, that she had the right to know why I faked my death." "And what did you say?" "That she always knew the truth about her father, but chose to ignore it," Sarah said with deep sadness. "And that if she really cared about Lily, she would have come back much sooner." "How did she react?" Jessica asked. "She was furious. She said I was a liar, that she would prove I was a negative influence in Lily's life." Sarah began to cry. "She said she would tell the judge that I was a fugitive from justice." David felt his anger reach a dangerous level. "Did she threaten you?" "She said if I didn't voluntarily step away from Lily, she would have me arrested for document forgery and fraud." "She can't do that," Jessica said firmly. "You fled from domestic violence. Any judge will understand that." "I hope so," Sarah whispered. "But I'm afraid she might be right. I'm afraid I'm just complicating things for you all." David knelt beside Sarah's chair and took her trembling hands in his. "Sarah," he said, looking into the blue eyes that were just like Lily's, but filled with kindness that her daughter did not possess, "you are Lily's grandma. You have every right to be in her life, and more importantly, Lily needs you. But what if Marina manages to take me away from here? What if she separates our family? Sarah asked. Then we will fight, David said simply. All of us, together. From the backyard came the sound of Lily laughing as she played with the other children. It was a sound David had learned to cherish over the past few months. Pure, genuine, full of joy. That was exactly what he was going to fight to protect. Marina might have biological rights, but they had something much more powerful. A real family, built with love, patience, and daily dedication. The war was declared, but David finally knew what his strategy was: to show the truth. The Central Park Elementary School yard was filled with colorful bunting, food stalls, and the irresistible smell of sweet popcorn mixed with hot cider. It was the first school fair that David was actively participating in Lily's life, and he felt completely out of his element, trying to tie checkered fabric at a fishing booth while watching other families who seemed to know exactly what they were doing. "Dad, it's not like that," Lily laughed, running up to him in a country-style dress that Sarah had hand-sewn. The dress was a work of art. Red and white checkered fabric with ruffles, colorful ribbons, and even small flowers hand-stitched into the pockets. "How is it not like that, Princess?" David asked, looking at the knot he had made, that resembled a tangled mess of fabric. "It has to be looser, or the wind won't blow it," Jessica said, approaching with Jake and Emily in tow. She wore a dress similar to Lily's, but in shades of blue, and she had braided her hair with colorful ribbons. David paused for a moment to admire her. Jessica had a natural beauty that intensified when she smiled that genuine way. "Where's Sarah?" David asked, undoing the knot to try again. "She went to help in the school kitchen," Jessica replied, starting to arrange the bunting with the skill of someone who had participated in many school fairs. "She knows all the traditional recipes, and the other moms were impressed with her suggestions for the hot cider." David smiled. In recent weeks, Sarah had become a beloved figure at Lily's school. She participated in parent meetings, helped with school projects, and always offered to assist with events. The teachers loved talking to her about old pedagogical methods that still worked, and the other grandmas treated her as an authority on domestic matters. "Mr. David!" a voice called from behind him. It was Mrs. Smith, the mother of Lily's classmate. "So good to see you here, and congratulations on your mom." David frowned, confused. "My mom? Mrs. Sarah. What a wise woman. She taught us some recipes for our booth that are a huge hit," Mrs. Smith explained excitedly. "And what an interesting story, right? Escaping from an abusive marriage, starting over. She's a warrior." "Did she share her story?" David asked, surprised. "She did. She said she spent years in hiding, but now she could finally be a grandma to her beloved granddaughter," Mrs. Smith continued. "What an example of strength, and Lily is so happy, so different from before." "Different? How?" Jessica asked, stepping closer to the conversation. "Oh, before she was a more withdrawn girl, you know. Polite, well-behaved, but a bit sad. Now she's radiant. She talks about Grandma and Aunt Jessica all the time." Mrs. Smith smiled. "The teacher mentioned that her grades have improved a lot, and she's participating more in group activities." David felt a warmth in his chest. He had noticed changes in Lily, but hearing external confirmation was comforting, especially considering that Marina questioned whether the current family environment was suitable for the girl. "Attention, everyone!" The school principal grabbed the microphone from the makeshift stage. "We're going to start the children's square dance." Lily ran back to David, taking his hand. "Dad, you're going to dance with me in the square dance." "I don't know how to square dance, Princess," David protested. "I'll teach you," she said, pulling him toward the center of the yard, where other children were already organizing with their parents. David looked desperately at Jessica, who laughed and waved for him to go. "Go, David. Just follow the commands." The next 15 minutes were a mix of embarrassment and pure joy. David stepped on his own feet, missed all the directions, and at one point ended up spinning the wrong way and nearly knocked over the father of a classmate. Lily. But Lily's crystal-clear laughter with each of his mistakes made it all worthwhile. "Do-si-do, swing your partner!" shouted the square dance caller, and David desperately tried to follow the movements, always a beat behind. When the music ended, Lily threw herself into his arms, laughing so hard her cheeks were red. "Daddy, you're the worst dancer in the world!" "Thanks for the honesty, princess," David laughed, hugging her tightly. "But you're the best dad in the world," she added, and David felt his eyes welling up. "What a lovely scene," a familiar voice said behind him. David turned and felt his blood run cold. Sarah was there, dressed in expensive clothes completely inappropriate for a school fair. High heels, designer dress, perfect makeup. Next to her was a man in a suit whom David presumed to be her lawyer. "Sarah," David said, instinctively pulling Lily closer to him. "Hello, David." "Lily." Sarah smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I came to see how my daughter is developing in her current environment." Lily hid behind David's legs, watching Sarah with a mix of curiosity and shyness. "Do you remember me, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, awkwardly crouching in her high heels. Lily shook her head. "I'm your mommy," Sarah said softly, but David could detect frustration in her voice. "My mommy is in heaven," Lily innocently replied. "Grandma Sarah told me." Sarah's face tightened. "Your grandma is telling lies, sweetheart. Mommy isn't in heaven. Mommy is right here." "Lily," David interjected, "why don't you go look for Grandma Sarah? She was in the kitchen." Lily nodded and ran off, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "She doesn't recognize me," Sarah said, standing up and adjusting her dress. "What did you expect? You abandoned her when she was 4. Now she's 7, David replied coldly. "I didn't abandon her. I needed time to get myself together," Sarah corrected. And David noticed she repeated the same phrase like a mantra. Dr. Henry Alvarenga, the man next to Sarah, introduced himself, extending a business card. "Lawyer for Mrs. Johnson. I'm here to observe the environment in which the minor is being raised." David took the card and immediately recognized the name. Dr. Alvarenga was famous in New York for his controversial family law cases and had a reputation for using any strategy to win. "And what's your assessment?" David asked sarcastically. "Interesting," Dr. Alvarenga replied, making notes in a small notebook. "Public school fare, low-income families, rustic environment. It's a traditional school fair at an excellent school, attended by hard-working and honest families," David retorted, feeling his anger rise. "Of course," Dr. Alvarenga smiled insincerely. "And that lady running the kitchen would be the famous, resurrected grandmother?" David looked in the direction the lawyer was pointing and saw Sarah distributing hot cider to a group of children, laughing and chatting animatedly with other mothers. "That lady is Sarah Johnson, Lily's legitimate grandmother, and one of the most upstanding people I know," David said firmly. "Who faked her own death for 15 years, Sarah added maliciously. "What kind of influence could that have on an impressionable child? The kind of influence from someone who had the courage to start over to escape domestic violence." A new voice joined the conversation. Jessica had approached, and although her voice was calm, David could see the determination in her eyes. "And who would you be?" Dr. Alvarenga asked, assessing Jessica from head to toe in a clearly prejudiced manner. "Jessica Santos, a family friend," she replied with dignity. "The cleaning lady girlfriend," Sarah said disdainfully. "How convenient to have someone to do the housework for free." David felt like exploding, but Jessica discreetly placed a hand on his arm, signaling for him to stay calm. "Actually," Jessica said calmly. "I do work in urban cleaning, yes. I take great pride in my honest work. I also have a degree in education and am finishing a postgraduate degree in psychopedagogy on the weekends." David looked at her in surprise. Jessica had never mentioned higher education. "How interesting, Doctor," Alvarenga said, clearly trying to find a loophole. "And why do you work in urban cleaning if you have a degree in education?" "Because when my husband abandoned me with 2 small children, I had to take the first job that came along to put food on the table," Jessica replied unflinchingly. "But I never stopped studying and improving myself." "Lily!" Sarah called when she saw the girl returning with Sarah. "Come here, sweetheart. Mommy wants to talk to you." Lily hesitated and looked at David, who nodded for her to approach. "Are you enjoying the fair?" Sarah asked, trying to sound maternal. "I am. Grandma taught me how to make little flags and Daddy danced square dance with me," Lily replied excitedly. "That's great. And don't you miss traveling, seeing other countries, beautiful places?" Sarah pressed. Lily furrowed her brow, thinking, "I like home. I like school, my friends, Grandma Sarah, Aunt Jessica. But wouldn't you like to live in a place where it snows, where you can learn other languages?" Sarah continued. "I'm already learning English at school," Lily said, "and Aunt Jessica is teaching me some words in Spanish." David could see the frustration growing on Sarah's face. She clearly expected Lily to express interest in traveling or dissatisfaction with her current life. "Lily," Sarah approached, "come here. Mrs. Johnson wants to see you. She said you're just like my Sarah when she was little." "Really, Grandma? Am I just like Mommy?" Lily asked, looking back and forth between Sarah and Sarah. "Just like her," Sarah confirmed, and David noticed tears in her eyes, especially when she smiles. Sarah looked visibly emotional for a moment, but quickly regained her cold expression. "Well," Dr. Alvarenga said, closing his notebook, "we've seen enough for today." "Lily," Sarah said, and crouching down again, "Mommy is leaving now, but she'll be back soon to—" Lily looked confused at David. "Dad, I don't want to leave home." "You're not leaving home, Princess," David said firmly, looking directly at Jessica. "No one is going to force you to go anywhere." "We'll see," Jessica said, standing up. "We'll see what the court has to say about that." After Jessica and her lawyer left, David sat at a plastic table in the schoolyard, feeling emotionally drained. Lily had gone back to playing with her friends, seemingly forgetting the uncomfortable meeting, but David knew that things were just beginning. "David?" Jessica sat down beside him. "Are you okay?" "You didn't tell me you had a degree in education," he said, looking at her. Jessica looked away. "I didn't think it was relevant." "How could it not be relevant? This could be crucial in the case, because I don't want you to think I'm with you out of interest, or that I'm trying to be a motherly substitute for Lily, for professional reasons," she explained. "I care for her because I love her, not because I studied for it." David took her hand. "Jessica, don't you realize this changes everything? A judge will see that Lily is being cared for by a dedicated father, an experienced grandmother, and a qualified educator. Jessica can't compete with that." "As long as they don't care about our social background," Sarah said, joining them at the table. "How was the conversation with Jessica?" David asked. "Painful," Sarah admitted. "She's still my daughter, David, and as much as she has become this bitter person, I still see in her the scared girl that Richard raised." "That doesn't justify what she's doing now," Jessica said gently. "It doesn't justify, but it explains," Sarah sighed. Jessica never learned to love truly because she was never truly loved. Richard saw her as an extension of himself, not as a person. David fell silent, processing Sarah's words. For a moment, he felt a pang of pity for Jessica, but then he looked at Lily happily playing with the other children and remembered that his responsibility was to protect his daughter, not to understand his ex-wife. "What do we do now?" he asked. Now we document everything that happened today, Jessica said determinedly. The people who confirmed how happy Lily is, Jessica's behavior, how Lily reacted. And I'll call Dr. Smith tomorrow morning to tell him about your qualifications, David added. Jessica, do you have your diploma, academic record, everything documented? I do, and letters of recommendation from my graduate professors. Perfect. Sarah looked at the two and smiled. You know I'm very proud of you both. Why? David asked. Because you're fighting for Lily, but you're fighting the right way. With love, with dignity, showing what's best for her, Sarah explained. Jessica is fighting for possession, you're fighting for family. When the event ended and they returned home, David put Lily to bed and then sat on the porch with Jessica, watching the city lights. Jessica, he said, can I ask you a personal question? Sure. Why didn't you ever pursue education? Why did you stay in urban cleaning even after graduating? Jessica was silent for a few moments. Because I tried. Right after I graduated, I got a position at a private school. On the first day, a mother complained that she didn't want her child to be educated by a woman of that kind. What kind? Black, from a poor background, single mother, Jessica said simply. The principal called me in and said it. Might be better for me to look for opportunities more suited to my profile. David felt a dull anger rising within him. That's criminal. It's the reality, Jessica said without bitterness. After that, I tried public schools, but there was always someone with more connections. So I accepted that maybe my destiny was different, and I dedicated myself to educating my own children in the best way possible. And now? Now, she smiled, looking at him. Maybe it's time to try again. Lily has restored my confidence that I can make a difference in a child's life. David took her hand and kissed it gently. Jessica, you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever met. And you, David, are the most stubborn and protective man I have ever known, she laughed. And I love you for that. I love you too, David said, and for the first time since Jessica had reappeared, he felt that maybe they could really win this battle. After all, they weren't just fighting for legal rights. They were fighting for true love. The July rain was pounding against the windows of the apartment when David was awakened by the persistent ring of his cell phone. It was 5:30 in the morning, and only emergencies would justify a call at that hour. He picked up the device, still groggy, and saw Dr. Smith's name on the screen. "Hello?" David answered, already feeling his stomach tighten. "David, I need you to come to my office urgently." The lawyer's voice sounded tense. "My investigator has discovered some things about Jessica that completely change the scenario of the case." "What kind of things?" David asked, getting out of bed and walking to the window so as not to wake Lily, who had slept with him after a nightmare. "I'd prefer to explain in person. Can you be here at 8? "I can." David hung up the phone and stared at the grey city below. What could be so important that it couldn't wait until a normal hour? Did Jessica really have proof of financial stability in Paris? Or worse, had she found some legal loophole that could facilitate her victory? At 7 in the morning, David was in the kitchen trying to make coffee without waking Sarah, who was still asleep. Lately, she had been more tired, and he had noticed that sometimes she seemed confused about small things, forgetting where she had placed her glasses or asking the same question twice in a conversation. "Good morning, Dad." Lily appeared in the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Why did you wake up so early?" "I need to take care of some work stuff, Princess," David lied, not wanting to worry her. "Do you want me to make your morning coffee?" "I'll wait for Grandma to wake up," Lily said, snuggling into a chair. "She makes the best coffee." David smiled. It was true. Sarah had a gift for turning any simple meal into a cozy experience. Even a simple morning coffee became special with her perfectly toasted bread and the loving way she cut the fruit. "Lily," David sat down next to his daughter, "are you happy living here with us? With Grandma Sarah and Aunt Jessica?" "Very happy," Lily replied without hesitation. "Why?" "I just wanted to make sure," David said, kissing her forehead. "If someone asks you where you want to live, what will you say?" "Here with you, of course," Lily said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Dad, is that lady from the party coming back?" David hesitated. "Maybe." "She's kind of strange," Lily commented with the frankness of children. "She doesn't seem like a real mom." "What do you mean?" "She didn't know I like strawberries in my yogurt or that I'm scared of thunder," Lily explained. "Grandma and Aunt Jessica know everything about me." David felt a pang of sadness mixed with anger. Marina had missed all those little details that formed his daughter's personality, her fears, her preferences, her dreams. How dare she show up after 3 years and claim the right to take Lily away from everything that made her happy? An hour later, David was in Dr. Smith's office, who greeted him with a serious expression and a thick folder on the table. "David," Dr. Smith began without preamble, "what I'm about to tell you is delicate and can be used as our main weapon in the case, but it can also backfire if we're not careful." "Just tell me," David said impatiently. "Marina isn't living in Paris. In fact, she hasn't left the USA in the last 3 years. Dr. Smith opened the folder and showed a series of photographs and documents. She's living in a flat in the Upper West Side, supported by a married businessman named Robert Miller. David took the photographs and saw Marina coming in and out of a residential building, always accompanied by an older man who looked prosperous. "Who is Robert Miller?" David asked. "Owner of 3 gas stations in the city, married for 25 years with 3 adult children," Dr. Smith explained. "Marina has been his mistress for 2 years. "That explains the resources to hire Dr. Alvarenga," David murmured. "But why does she want Lily now? It doesn't make sense for a mistress to want to take on a child." "That's where it gets interesting." Dr. Smith flipped through some pages in the folder. "Robert Miller is being investigated by the IRS for tax evasion. His lawyers suggested that he demonstrate social and familial responsibility to mitigate a possible conviction." David felt nauseous. "You're saying Marina wants to use Lily to help her lover escape problems with the IRS?" "That's exactly it. Apparently the idea is for him to informally adopt Lily, showing that he is taking on family responsibilities of his partner. It's a common strategy in cases of wealthy individuals with legal troubles." David stood up from the chair, walking to the window. The rain continued to fall outside, and he felt like punching something. "There's more," Dr. Smith continued. "Marina is in debt. She owes almost $200,000 in credit cards and loans. Robert has been paying her debts, but in return, she needs to collaborate with his legal strategy." "What kind of collaboration?" "To appear as a serious, mature woman who is rebuilding her family. Gaining custody of Lily would be the final proof of that transformation," Dr. Smith explained. "The plan is to gain custody, keep Lily for a few months until Robert's situation is resolved, and then, well, probably put her in a boarding school or something similar." David felt a fury rising inside him like he had never felt in his life. "She wants to use my daughter as an accessory to impress a judge." "Exactly. And there is evidence of all this." Dr. Smith showed other documents. Bank transfers from Robert to Marina, emails discussing the strategy, even recordings of phone conversations where they openly talk about using Lily. Recordings? How did they get that? "Robert has been under investigation for months. The FBI has a court order to wiretap his phones," Dr. Smith explained. My contact at the district attorney's office gave me some transcripts that can be used in our case. David sat down again, trying to process everything. Does this mean we win the case? It means we have a very good chance. But Marina is still the biological mother, and if she gets a good lawyer, which she has, she can claim that she has changed her life, that she was manipulated by Robert, that she really wants to be a mother now. What a mess, David murmured. The good news is that we have cards up our sleeve that she doesn't know we have. Dr. Smith smiled for the first time in the meeting, and there's one more thing that can help us a lot. What? Sarah has letters that Marina wrote to her over the years, including some recent ones where she admits that she never wanted to be a mother, that she feels trapped by the responsibility of having a daughter. David's eyes widened. Sarah never told me about those letters. She reached out to me yesterday through Jessica. She said she didn't want to worry you, but that she had documents, and that could help. Dr. Smith explained. There are more than 20 letters written over 5 years, including 3 sent in the last 2 months. What do those recent letters say? In one of them, Marina writes, "Mom, sometimes I think I made a terrible mistake having Lily. I wasn't born for this. David is a much better father than I'll ever be a mother." David felt a mix of sadness and validation. It was painful to know that Raphael really didn't want Lily, but at the same time, it confirmed everything he had always suspected. And there's more, Dr. Smith continued. In the most recent letter she writes, "I need Lily now for reasons I can't explain, but I promise that when everything is resolved, I'll find a way for David to have her back. He is who she really loves anyway." She admits in writing that she's using Lily, David exclaimed. Exactly. With these letters and the evidence about Robert Miller, we have a solid case to prove that Jessica has no genuine interest in the child's well-being. David fell silent for a few minutes, absorbing all the information. Finally, a question arose in his mind. Dr. Smith, how did Sarah get these letters if Jessica thought she was dead? That's another interesting revelation. Dr. Smith smiled. Jessica always knew her mother was alive. How? Richard told her before he died. He said where Sarah was living, how she had changed her name, everything. But he threatened Jessica, saying that if she tried to contact her, he would come back from the grave to destroy both their lives. And Jessica believed that. Jessica has always had psychological issues related to paternal control. Even after his death, she kept the secret, but started sending letters to Sarah through a fake postal address. That's why Sarah always knew where to find Lily when she disappeared. David understood. She knew that Jessica wasn't really interested, and when she saw the opportunity, Sarah took the chance to finally meet her granddaughter, Dr. Smith concluded, and discovered how much Lily needed a stable maternal figure. David stood up again, this time feeling energized instead of furious. What do we do now? Now we prepare our defense based on 3 pillars. The letters proving that Jessica has no genuine interest in being a mother, the evidence that she is being manipulated by third-party financial interests, and solid documentation of how Lily is thriving in her current family environment. When are we going to use this information? At the preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. We'll let Jessica and Dr. Alvarenga present their arguments first, and then we'll dismantle everything with our evidence. David smiled for the first time in days. Jessica was right. The truth always comes to light. David, Dr. Smith said, becoming serious again, there's one thing I need to warn you about. When we present this evidence, Jessica will become desperate. Desperate people do unpredictable things. What kind of things? She might try to kidnap Lily. She might try to bribe witnesses. She might even try to frame you or Sarah with lies, Dr. Smith explained. We need to be prepared for anything. David nodded. I'll reinforce security at home and at Lily's school, and I'll talk to Jessica and Sarah about all this." "Good idea. And David," Dr. Smith also stood up, "I know you're anxious, but try to keep Lily's routine normal. Kids sense when adults are stressed." When David got home at noon, he found Jessica in the kitchen preparing lunch while Lily did her homework at the living room table. Sarah was in the armchair knitting, but David noticed she seemed more fragile than in the morning. "How did it go with the lawyer?" Jessica asked quietly. "We have good news," David replied, hugging her from behind. "Very good." He told her everything Dr. Smith had discovered, watching Jessica's expression change from worry to disbelief and finally to indignation. "She wants to use Lily as an accessory to impress a judge?" Jessica whispered, furious. "Exactly, but now we have proof of that." "Sarah," David gently called, "Dr. Smith told me about the letters. Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" Sarah blushed and lowered her knitting. "Because they are letters from a daughter to her mother. Even knowing that Jessica was wrong, I had hoped that she would change her mind." "Can I see the letters?" "Of course." Sarah struggled to get up and went to her room, returning with a shoebox full of envelopes. David took some letters and began to read. Each line confirmed what Dr. Smith had said. Jessica clearly expressed her reluctance to be a mother, her regrets about having Lily, and more recently, her plans to use her daughter to solve financial problems. "How did you manage to keep in touch with her without me knowing?" David asked. "She sent the letters to a friend's address, who forwarded them to me," Sarah explained. "And I never replied. I just read and kept them, hoping that one day she would change." "Dad," Lily appeared in the kitchen, "can I play in Aunt Jessica's backyard this afternoon?" David looked at Jessica, who nodded positively. "Of course, Princess, but stay close to the house, okay?" "Okay. Aunt Jessica is going to teach me how to make fudge." After Lily ran off to grab her toys, David sat next to Sarah in the living room. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me," he said gently. "Go ahead." "Do you think Jessica might try something drastic when she finds out we have this evidence against her?" Sarah was silent for a few moments, her hands trembling slightly. Jessica has always been unpredictable when she felt cornered. When she was a child, if Richard pressured her too much, she would throw terrible tantrums, break things, even hurt herself to get attention. And now, as an adult? "I don't know," Sarah admitted, "but I'm afraid she might be capable of anything if she thinks she's going to lose control of the situation." David took Sarah's trembling hand. "I'm not going to let her hurt you or Lily. I promise." "I know, my son." Sarah smiled, and for the first time, David noticed how much she had aged in the past few weeks. "You are a good man. Jessica was lucky to have you as Lily's father." That afternoon, while watching Lily play in Jessica's backyard with Jake and Emily, David felt truly optimistic about the outcome of the case. For the first time, they had solid evidence, a structured family, and more importantly, a clearly happy child. Raphael felt a chill in the air, but Dr. Smith was right about one thing. Desperate people do unpredictable things, and David had the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. That night, he installed security cameras at home and hired a discreet security guard to accompany Lily at school. It wasn't paranoia, it was protection, because family protects each other. And now he had an entire family to defend. August brought a dry, biting cold to New York, along with a series of events that would completely transform the landscape of the legal battle. David was in his office at TechFlow Solutions, analyzing quarterly reports, when Patricia walked in with a look of panic he had never seen before. "Mr. Johnson," she said with a trembling voice, There's a team from the IRS downstairs. They want to speak with you about tax irregularities in the company. David felt his blood run cold. What kind of irregularities? They didn't say, but they brought a search warrant. David stood up from his chair, his mind racing. TechFlow Solutions had always been scrupulously honest in its tax obligations. He personally reviewed all accounting reports. How could there be irregularities? "Send them up," he said, trying to keep calm. 10 minutes later, his office was filled with auditors examining documents and seizing digital files. The lead agent, a middle-aged man named Dr. Santos, explained that they were investigating possible tax evasion related to contracts made in the last 3 years. "Mr. Johnson," Dr. Santos said, "are you aware of any undeclared payments made to shell companies between 2021 and 2023? "No," David replied categorically. "All our payments are properly recorded and declared." "Then how do you explain these transfers?" Dr. Santos showed a spreadsheet with amounts David did not recognize. As he examined the documents, he noticed something that made him break into a cold sweat. The alleged shell companies had the same naming pattern and E-in as some companies in Robert Miller's group. "Dr. Santos," David said carefully, "may I suggest you check for any mistakes? Those EINs are not familiar to me." "Mr. Johnson, we have evidence that your company was used to launder money from tax evasion by third parties," Dr. Santos said coldly. "You are being investigated for conspiracy and money laundering." David felt the world spin. Suddenly he understood what was happening. Jessica and Robert Miller had set a trap to criminally incriminate him. If he were arrested or prosecuted, he would automatically lose custody of Lily. "I need to call my lawyer," David said. "You can call, but you cannot leave the city until further notice." 3 hours later, David was in Dr. Smith's office with a look of despair that the lawyer immediately recognized as that of a man being manipulated by powerful enemies. "David," Dr. Smith said after reviewing the seized documents, "this is a very well-crafted trap." "What do you mean?" "Someone used your company's data to create false documents suggesting non-existent transactions. It's a case of document forgery, but done in a way that makes you look like the beneficiary," Dr. Smith explained. "It's too sophisticated to be a coincidence. Jessica and Robert Miller? Almost certainly, and the timing is perfect. This investigation will prevent you from maintaining custody of Lily until everything is clarified." David ran his hands through his hair, feeling cornered. How long does it take to clarify something like this? Months, maybe years. And in the meantime, Jessica can argue that Lily cannot stay with a father under criminal investigation. And if I prove it's a lie, even if you prove it, the damage is already done. The image of instability will weigh against you in the custody hearing. David stood up and began pacing the room. There has to be a way to reverse this. There is, but it's risky. Dr. Smith opened a drawer and took out a digital recorder. "Remember I told you we had recordings of Robert and Jessica discussing the use of Lily?" "I remember. In one of those recordings, they specifically mention a plan to criminally incriminate you if conventional tactics didn't work." David stopped pacing. "Do you have evidence that they set this up against me?" "I do. But using these recordings means exposing that we have access to the district attorney's office investigations on Robert Miller. It's burning an important source." "Do it," David said without hesitation. "Burn the source, use the recordings, do whatever it takes." "David, think carefully. If we use this now—" "Dr. Smith," David interrupted, "my daughter is about to be handed over to a woman who sees her as a bargaining chip. I don't care about burning sources or strategies. I want my daughter safe." Dr. Smith nodded slowly. "All right, I will contact our sources in the district attorney's office to expose the setup, but you need to be prepared for unforeseen consequences." When David arrived home that night, he found Jessica waiting for him in the living room with a worried expression. Sarah was resting in the bedroom, and Lily was doing homework at the kitchen table. "David," Jessica stood up as soon as she saw him, "is something wrong? You look—" "They tried to criminally incriminate me," David said quietly. "Jessica and her lover forged documents to involve me in a tax evasion investigation." Jessica put her hand to her chest. "My God, what now?" "Now we fight," David replied, hugging her. "Dr. Smith has evidence that it was a setup, but it will be complicated." "David," Jessica pulled back a little to look into his eyes, "there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "This morning, a man showed up at Lily's school asking about you. He said he was an investigative journalist and wanted to know about your current financial situation." David felt his stomach tighten. "And what did the school say?" "They didn't say anything, but they called to let me know. And there's more. Emily told me she saw a woman taking pictures of our house yesterday afternoon." "They're building a dossier to completely disqualify me," David realized. "It's not just the criminal investigation. People want to destroy me publicly." "Dad!" Lily appeared in the living room. "I finished my homework. Can I watch cartoons?" "Of course, Princess," David said, trying to sound normal. "But stay here in the living room, okay?" "Okay!" After Lily settled on the couch, David and Jessica went to the kitchen, where they could talk more privately. "Jessica," David said, "I need to prepare you for the possibility that things may get much worse before they get better." "What do you mean?" "If the criminal investigation progresses, they may determine that Lily cannot stay with me temporarily. In that case, she would automatically go to Jessica." Jessica leaned against the kitchen counter, looking dazed. "That can't be. After everything we've discovered about Jessica—" "Justice is slow, Jessica, and while the processes are ongoing, Jessica could obtain temporary custody claiming that I am a risk to Lily." "And if that happens?" David took her hands in his. "Then we'll have to trust that Lily remembers everything she learned from us, that she remembers she has a family that loves her and is fighting to get her back." Jessica began to cry silently. "David, I can't lose her. She has become like a daughter to me." "We're not going to lose her," David said with a determination he wasn't sure he truly felt. "We're not." That same night, after putting Lily to bed, David received a call from Dr. Smith. "David, I have good news and bad news," the lawyer said. "Just tell me both." "The good news is that I gained access to the recordings that prove the setup against you. I can file a motion to dismiss the investigation as early as tomorrow." "And the bad news?" "Jessica obtained an emergency injunction. She claimed that you are under criminal investigation and that this poses a risk to Lily's physical and emotional safety." David sat heavily in a chair. "What does that mean?" "It means she can take Lily at any moment, starting tomorrow. The injunction allows for the removal of the minor from the paternal home until a final resolution of the case." David was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. "Dr. Smith, how much time do we have?" "Hours, maybe. The order can be enforced at any time after 7 in the morning." "And there's nothing we can do?" "I can try for a counter-injunction based on the evidence we have against Jessica, but I don't know if we'll have enough time." After hanging up, David sat in the dark living room for a long time, listening to the silence of the apartment. In a few hours, Jessica could show up with a court order and take Lily away. The girl who had become the center of his life, who had brought joy and purpose to his days, could be ripped away from him by a carefully planned legal trap. He went up to the room where Lily was sleeping and watched her for a few minutes. She was nestled among the stuffed animals that Sarah had bought, wearing the pajamas that Jessica had chosen, sleeping peacefully in the room he had decorated, thinking of every detail a 7-year-old girl might like. "Dad?" Lily opened her sleepy eyes. "Are you okay?" I'm fine, Princess. David sat on the edge of the bed. I just came to give you a good-night kiss. Dad, Lily sat up and hugged him. You seem sad. David held her close, inhaling the scent of the children's shampoo that had become so familiar. Lily, you know that Dad loves you more than anything in the world, right? I know, and I love you more than anything too. And no matter what happens, wherever you are, Dad will always be fighting to stay close to you, okay? Lily pulled back a little and looked at him with her serious green eyes. Dad, you're talking like when people leave in movies. David smiled sadly. His daughter was too smart to be fooled. Princess, remember I explained about your biological mother? The strange lady from the school fair? Yes, maybe she will come to get you tomorrow so you can spend some time together. Lily frowned. But I don't want to go with her. I want to stay here with you, with Grandma Sarah, and with Aunt Jessica. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes adults have to follow rules even when they don't agree with them. What rules? Rules that say sometimes children need to be with their biological mothers, even when they are happy where they are. Lily was silent for a few moments, processing the information with a seriousness that only children can have. Dad, she finally said, if I have to go with her, will you come get me? I will. You can be sure I will. Promise. I promise. And Grandma Sarah and Aunt Jessica will be here when I come back? They will be. Lily hugged him again, and David felt tears burning in his eyes. Dad, she whispered, I will be strong, just like Grandma Sarah when she had to. Hide from the mean grandpa. In that simple phrase, David found the strength he needed. His 7-year-old daughter was preparing to be brave. He couldn't be anything less than that. That's right, Princess. You will be strong, and Dad will be strong too, and soon we will all be together again. The next morning at 7:15, the doorbell rang. David opened the door to find Jessica accompanied by 2 court officers and a social worker. Good morning, David, Jessica said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I came to get my daughter. Behind her, David could see Dr. Johnson in the hallway, filming everything with a cell phone. The perfect storm had arrived, but David was ready to face it, because true family never gives up. Never. 3 months later, November. The family court had never seemed as imposing as it did on that cloudy November day. David adjusted his tie for the 5th time as he walked through the hallways accompanied by Dr. Smith, Jessica and Sarah. The echo of their footsteps mixed with the chatter of other lawyers and families waiting for their hearings. Mr. David, Dr. Smith said softly, remember what we discussed. Let me handle the questioning. If emotions take over, take a deep breath. David nodded, but his mind was completely focused on what would happen in the next few minutes. 3 months. 3 months. Without waking up to the sound of Lily playing, without helping her with her homework, without hearing her wild stories about what happened at school. 3 months that felt like 3 years. The first days after Lily had been taken by Jessica were the worst of David's life. The silent house, the empty room, the feeling of complete helplessness in front of a system that seemed to protect biological rights more than the actual well-being of the child. Sarah had spent an entire week unable to get out of bed, and Jessica had to take leave from work to care for her. But then came the turnaround. Dr. Smith not only managed to dismiss the criminal investigation against David, proving that everything had been fabricated by Robert Miller, but also obtained an arrest warrant against Robert for document forgery and attempted obstruction of justice. Jessica, who was completely dependent on his financial support, saw her world collapse overnight. The evidence piled up like pieces of a macabre puzzle. The phone recordings, where Jessica and Robert openly discussed using Lily as a legal accessory, were presented to the judge. The handwritten letters from Jessica to Sarah, admitting that she never wanted to be a mother, were examined and confirmed as authentic. And the report from the social worker who monitored Lily during the 3 months she was with Jessica was devastating. The child shows clear signs of emotional stress, the report stated. She has lost weight, developed frequent nightmares, and repeatedly expressed the desire to return home with her father, paternal grandmother, and Aunt Jessica. The applicant, Jessica Johnson, demonstrated difficulty in establishing appropriate routines for the child and outsourced most of the care to hired babysitters. But the final evidence, the one that definitively sealed the case, came from Lily herself. During one of the supervised visits that David had after Robert's arrest, Lily had whispered in her father's ear, "Daddy, Mom, Jessica said that when her problem is over, she will put me in a school far away and only see me during vacations." David asked Dr. Smith to arrange for a monitored session with a child psychologist, and there Lily not only repeated this information, but also revealed that Jessica often left for days, leaving her only with unknown caregivers. "Mr. David," Jessica's voice brought him back to the present. "It's time." The courtroom was smaller than David had imagined, with ivory-colored walls and an imposing table where Judge Dr. Carlos Henry Moore sat, examining a stack of documents. Jessica was on the other side of the room with Dr. Johnson, visibly thinner and with deep, dark circles that makeup couldn't hide. "Good morning," Judge Moore said as everyone settled in. "We are here to determine the permanent custody of the child Lily Sarah Johnson. Before we hear the final arguments, I would like to speak personally with the child." David felt his heart race. In the last 3 months, he had seen Lily only during the weekly supervised visits, and although she always seemed happy to see him, she also appeared quieter, more cautious. How would a 7-year-old behave in front of a judge? The door opened, and a social worker brought Lily by the hand. David had to control himself not to stand up and run to her. His girl was taller, with longer hair, wearing a dress he didn't recognize, a formal blue dress that made her look older than 7. "Hello, Lily," Judge Moore said in a gentle voice. "Do you know why you are here today?" Lily nodded, her eyes searching for David in the room. When she saw him, a small but genuine smile appeared on her face. "Can you tell me where you would like to live?" the judge asked. "With my daddy," Lily answered without hesitation, "and with Grandma Sarah and Aunt Jessica." "And why?" Lily looked at Jessica, then at David, and finally at the judge. "Because that's my real home, where I have my room with my stuffed animals, where Grandma helps me with my homework, where Aunt Jessica makes brownies with me, where Daddy reads me stories before bed." "And with your biological mother? How do you feel living with her?" Lily lowered her eyes. "Mom, Jessica is nice, but she doesn't know the things I like. She doesn't know I'm afraid of thunder. She doesn't know I like strawberries in yogurt. She doesn't know I can't sleep without my teddy bear." Judge Moore made some notes. "Lily, does your mother treat you well?" "She does, but she spends a lot of time on the phone, talking about money and problems. And sometimes she cries secretly and says she doesn't know what to do with me." David saw Jessica close her eyes, as if their daughter's words were daggers. "Is there anything else you would like to tell me?" the judge asked. Lily looked back at David, as if asking for permission. He nodded discreetly. "Your Honor," she said with the seriousness that only children can have, "I know that Mom Jessica had me in her belly, and that's why she's my mom. But family isn't just who had you in their belly, right? Family is who takes care of you every day, who loves you even when you make a mess, who stays awake when you're sick." The silence in the room was absolute. Even Dr. Johnson had stopped taking notes. "And who are these people to you?" Judge Moore asked gently. "My daddy, who never gave up looking for me when I got lost. Grandma Sarah, who teaches me recipes from my Italian great-grandma and tells me stories about Mom Jessica when she was little. And Aunt Jessica, who helps me with my homework and always knows when I'm sad. Lily paused for a moment, as if organizing her thoughts. Your Honor, she continued, Mom Jessica said she would give me a better life with trips and expensive things. But I already have the best life in the world. I have a family that truly loves me. Dr. Smith dismissed Lily, who was taken away again by the social worker. When the door closed, he turned to the lawyers. Dr. Johnson, would you like to make final remarks? Dr. Johnson stood up, but his argument sounded mechanical, lacking conviction. He spoke about biological rights, about second chances, about the importance of the maternal figure. But it was clear that even he knew the case was lost. Dr. Miller, the judge called. Dr. Miller stood up and began to present an organized summary of all the evidence. The letters from Jessica admitting she didn't want to be a mother, the recordings proving that she planned to use Lily to benefit Robert Miller, the detailed report on how Lily thrived in the family environment of David, Sarah, and Jessica. Your Honor, Dr. Miller concluded, this case is not about biological rights versus socio-affective rights. It is about what is best for a 7-year-old child who has already suffered maternal abandonment once and cannot be subjected again to the whims of an adult who sees her as an object, not as a daughter. Dr. Smith remained silent for a few minutes, examining the documents before him. The court's decision is as follows, he finally said. The permanent custody of the minor Lily Sarah Johnson is granted to her father, David Johnson. The petitioner, Jessica Sarah Johnson, will have the right to supervise visits once a month, provided she demonstrates a genuine interest in the child's well-being. David felt his legs tremble. Jessica took his hand and squeezed it tightly. Sarah began to cry silently. Furthermore, the judge continued, I officially recognize Sarah Johnson as the legitimate grandmother of the minor, with all the rights arising from this condition, and I authorize that Jessica Johnson be included in the family registry as the legal guardian, given the proven emotional bond and her training in education. Jessica abruptly stood up and left the room without saying a word, followed by Dr. Johnson. 15 minutes later, David was in the courthouse hallway when he saw Lily running towards him. He knelt down and she threw herself into his arms with such force that she almost knocked him over. Daddy, Daddy, can I go home? She shouted, clinging to his neck. Yes, princess, you can go home and never leave if you don't want to. And Grandma Sarah and Aunt Jessica too. Yes, them too. Lily pulled back a little and looked into her father's green eyes, which were exactly like hers. Daddy, she said, I learned something in these months. What did you learn? That home is not a place. Home is the people we love. David hugged her again, and for the first time in 3 months, he felt he could breathe completely. When they arrived home, the home where Sarah had left a special lunch in the oven, where Jessica had bought fresh flowers for every room, where Lily's room was exactly as she had left it, David sat on the porch, watching his daughter play in the yard with Jake and Emily. David, Jessica joined him. How do you feel? Complete, he simply replied. For the first time in my life, I feel complete. And now, what are we going to do? David looked at her, at Sarah knitting in the living room, at Lily laughing in the yard. Now we are going to be a family, for real, forever. Jessica smiled, and they cuddled on the sofa. You know I love you, right? I know, and you know I love you too. And Lily loves us both. That's all that matters. That night, after putting Lily to sleep in her own room, David sat at the kitchen table with Jessica and Sarah to plan for the future. Jessica, David said, I have a proposal for you. What proposal? I want you to marry me. Jessica almost dropped her teacup. What? I want to marry you. I want us to be an official legal family forever. David, Jessica said with tears in her eyes, are you sure, even knowing we will face prejudice, that people will talk? Let them talk, David said, taking her hand. I found the woman I love and who loves my daughter as if she were her own. What do I care what others think? And me, Sarah asked with a mischievous smile. Where do I fit into this story? You fit in as the official grandmother of the bride, David laughed. Jessica will need someone to help her plan the wedding. Oh my God, Jessica laughed and cried at the same time. This is crazy. It's the most sensible madness of my life, David said, standing up and kneeling beside her chair. Jessica Johnson, will you marry me? Yes, she shouted, throwing herself into his arms. Yes, yes, yes! The noise woke Lily, who appeared in the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. Why are you shouting? She asked. Because Aunt Jessica is going to be your official stepmother, David said, picking up his daughter. Really? Lily asked excitedly. Is she going to live here forever? Forever. And Grandma Sarah too? Grandma Sarah too, Lily clapped her hands. Now our family is complete. And it truly was. After months of struggle, pain, and fear of losing everything he loved, David finally had his family. Not a perfect family like in the movies, but a real family, built with love, patience, understanding, and a lot of effort. A family that started with a missing child poster stuck to a pole in Brooklyn and ended with 4 people sitting around a table, planning a future together. A family that proved that true love knows no social class. Family is not just biology, and sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected encounters. 6 months later, on a sunny May afternoon, David and Jessica got married in a simple ceremony in Jessica's backyard in Queens. Lily was the flower girl, wearing the dress that Sarah specially sewed for the occasion. Jessica did not attend, but she sent a card wishing them happiness, the first genuinely maternal gesture she made towards her daughter. And when the justice of the peace asked if David accepted Jessica as his wife, he looked at her, at Lily holding the bouquet, at Sarah knitting in the front row, and replied with a choked voice, I do, forever. Because some families are born, others are built. And the best ones are those that choose each other every day with love, dedication, and the certainty that together they can weather any storm.